Jennifer Hunt from REIN Canada. You are the Vice President of Research. Your company is constantly looking at what's happening in the real estate market. And that is a question that many people are striving to understand right now. How is this crisis affecting real estate, and what do they need to know to be able to make informed decisions, whether it's about buying, leasing, renting, selling? It's complex, but it's vital information for people, especially in business, to be able to make informed decisions.
100%. And right now there is more information flying around, and even more challenging than ever to decipher what's real, what's relevant, what's pertinent, and how to make smart choices in difficult times.
So to that end, how does the marketplace look?
Yes. So it depends on which marketplace, of course, and it depends on what you're looking to do. What I recommend right now, whether, let's say you're a real estate investor, what I recommend right now is to do some triage. So you're talking leadership in crisis. What do you need to do for your own real estate business? Now, first of all, for your own home, for your own sanity, for your own resources to get through that. And then also some triage of your business. So every real estate property is its own business, and looking at what you've got available in terms of assets, in terms of resources, and in terms of time, in terms of team, and then creating some priorities. So, and then I suggest and recommend taking that sort of triage approach, whether it's to a portfolio, to one business, to your home, whatever that needs to be, and then looking at a short term, a medium term, and a long term, and breaking it out in those structures. So that's what we've started to do. I am a real estate investor as well. So I'm practicing what we're preaching and what we're sharing with our REIN community, and then surrounding yourself, of course, with those other folks who are leaders or who are like-minded, and getting really backed by resources and community, because this is the time to pool best practices and things like that.
So when it comes to being a real estate investor, so your business is investing in real estate, this has got to be a very unnerving time, especially if you're in the business of commercial real estate investment. You're going to have a wide range of tenants who are suddenly asking for rent relief or are unable to pay their monthly obligation to you, which they're contractually obliged to. But the reality sometimes is that a company is pinched, and then you're watching the value of your investment become uncertain. What's the leading bit of advice or insight that you're able to give to investors at this point on how to find their way through that?
The very, very first step is doing that triage, and then understanding where your business is today. Doing a cash flow analysis. So for example, a rolling cash flow of what you're expecting in, what you're expecting out, and do it by a weekly cash flow, so that you can get a better picture. And once you get that in front of you, it makes it a lot more effective to make decisions, and getting that right in front of you is very helpful. And then in terms of the other components, it's actually sort of, if you probably want to know and get right to the chase here. Yes, getting cash, having some cash on hand. What does that look like? Does it need to be, the Bank of Matrice or like pulled out? Oh, no, we don't want to have everybody taking tons and tons of cash out of the system, because that can affect the bank liquidity. But having some on hand to get you through some sort of period for your own sanity, if you will, and then making sure that you've got some cash reserves as much as possible. So a couple of immediate strategies, for example, would be a refinance. Now, what's interesting about the refinances, and I'm in the middle of some, and so are many in our REIN member community, and so we're sharing sort of what's happening. And while we've seen some values in some markets actually go down, in others, they've gone up. Now, the reason for that, is because the real estate market is a lagging indicator. And as you may or may not be familiar, REIN's long-term real estate success formula truly is a formula that actually takes months to come to fruition. And when we look at real estate, it's at least a sort of the real estate market in terms of prices. They're typically a 12 to 18 month, even a 24-month cycle from GDP events, from economic events. So at a minimum, you're looking, and because this is accelerated, of course, so we are going to see this most likely a compressed long-term real estate success formula, or the economic turmoil formula, which is in reverse, where a negative GDP is going to obviously negatively impact real estate, but particularly in the commercial world, where cap rates are decided upon based on comparables, based on income, based on net operating income, and that type of thing. Those measures will not be impacted immediately. They take time to work through the system. So a recommendation, particularly in the multifamily residential, so commercial residential, is to do refinances as quickly as possible. Now, that said, are there challenges working with a bank right now? Many of them have been obviously fantastic. I know that me and my real estate team and my real estate business have spent hours on hold trying to get through in terms of the massive volumes of calls. But many of the institutions have been very willing of working through it. And so that's on the commercial side, refinance. If it's possible for you on the residential side, that's something to explore. Again, that's to extract equity, extract some capital, extract some cash that may be able to help you preserve. Many of us who invest in real estate are really seeing that for the long term as a real estate is a wealth creator. So the longer we can ride out the real estate and the real estate cycle, this too shall pass eventually, and there's lots of different ways of looking at that. And I'm going to switch to deferrals in terms of mortgage deferrals. There's been lots of questions out there about, should I defer, and does that impact my credit? And there's a lot of misinformation. And now, I'm not a mortgage expert or a financier in any way, shape, or form, but what I do want people to know is that when it comes to mortgage deferral, yes, it does impact your credit borrowing capability, which is very different than your credit score. So when it comes back to that triage plan, if you're wanting to get and extract and give yourself some breathing room for cash flow so that you can weather this pandemic, is to really look at those options. So a great option is to defer. And it's a little bit easier. There hasn't been a lot discussed on commercial properties or commercial multifamily residential, for example. But I have seen where, for example, British Columbia, the government of British Columbia, quote unquote, no one will lose their home due to pandemic, to the COVID-19. And that was announced yesterday. So yes, there's some real hope there. And then I've also read from some senior chief economists of CIBC, Scotiabank, where I've also seen that the quest and the request of governments to recognize the impact of, perhaps individuals who can't pay their rent, what's that going to impact in terms of the commercial multifamily apartment space? That conversation is now just surfacing. Today was the first day that I saw that happening. So then back to the residential side, deferrals are a little bit easier there because there's already been so much activity. The commercial component in terms of deferring mortgages is not yet quite gotten there, but the conversations are beginning. So back to the deferral is yes, it will impact your credit down the road in terms of borrowing ability. It's not free money. They're charging interest on the deferred timeline. So it is costing you something. However, it can provide some breathing room, and it is far superior than getting out a line of credit or credit cards and having those as your backup, because those those will, if you don't pay them, those ones will impact your credit score far greater than this deferral. And also a deferral, just to remind people, it's an agreement with your bank. So again, it's not having that negative impact on your credit score.
That's very interesting, because when I hear the government come forward and say, yes, we're going to give $500 to those people who are eligible, and not everybody is. So that means that there will be people who are renters who aren't going to get that money. They're going to be pinched, and then they're going to be turning to their landlord. And an awful lot of those landlords don't have deep cash reserves. So I think that your suggestions are important because we're talking about small business people frequently. Even though you go, yeah, but look at the value of that property. You're still running a small business, and you require that cash flow to meet your own obligations. And if you can move quickly with either going to deferral or refinancing, which I think is a great idea because you could refinance, have that cash on hand, which allows you to make your monthly obligations, even if your tenants are having trouble meeting theirs.
Yeah, and I think it's important. There's two things that I'd like to mention that I feel are important in this particular conversation is that, yes, it's likely that obviously we're only in sort of week 2, if you will. So yes, the economic impact, the employment impact is, I guess what I've seen in China and in South Korea, it was about a 3-month period. So we're in sort of week 2. The anticipation, of course, is that it would be that 3-month, and then at what point can you really extensively get back to economic activity, still with maintaining some social distancing so that there isn't a second wave. So that's all important information. But what do we do in the interim? And it's very important, can people pay rent? But I also want to just sort of slow the conversation down because many people are talking about, well, April 1st. And what I saw in Ontario, and I forget the date because they're all blending together right now. There's just so much information. But just this week, they announced in terms of only essential services. And it was quite a sensational headline that came out. And unfortunately, a lot of people got really freaked out by it, particularly rental housing providers who, by the way, rental housing providers provide about, in terms of the mom and pop shops or the small corporations and businesses, actually provide about 90% of rental housing in Canada. So yeah, think about the institutional investors and the big players. It's actually exactly as you described. It's small businesses who are just doing the best that they can for their families and to provide good homes for good families as well. So coming together as a community and working together is important. So then back to that Ontario announcement of only essential services can remain open. And those essential services in the headline were liquor stores. I don't know if you saw that, and a number of other ones, of course. However, in subsequent issuances and government, like actually going to the government website, there was actually over 74 sectors, notwithstanding all of the individual business types like car dealerships and just all these that are underneath of those sectors that are actually intended to remain open. And when we step back and start looking at that actual impact, and then actually looking at your own, if you're a real estate investor, looking at your own tenants. I know I've worked with my property managers, and where I don't have property managers, I've talked directly to my tenants and knowing, okay, are they at risk? What kind of jobs are they in? Where are they? Are they in any of those sectors? And again, that's part of that triage of really knowing your business and who's in it and who your clients are. And then being ahead of the curve, being proactive so that you can be in a position to work and negotiate with them should the time arise that it is challenging. The other component of that is in terms of leadership. And one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated about leadership is that I truly believe that the fundamental element of leadership is communication. If you can't communicate, you can't lead. And so if we take that, then we increase our frequency of communication, we increase our compassion, our care, and our proactive capabilities with our clients, with our investors, with our bankers, with our financiers, and have those conversations early and have them very richly, and then providing resources. And that's where, as the Vice President of Research for REIN, it's, okay, what resources are available federally for us as small business people, but then also for our tenants, and then making them accessible. So federally and provincially, and then even down to the municipal level as those start to become available. And then employing those and actually getting them out to your tenants. Okay, for example, my client might not be able to pay rent. What's going on? Here's the resources. And it's important, I believe, in these communications, because I've heard many investors really concerned about sort of the ban on evictions and things like that. So what consequences will those have? but being prepared and sharing with your tenants that it's still they're required, and the government, the BC government actually just the other day in their announcement as well, that you're required to pay their rent if you can. The benefits are available for if you and when you need them, but if you can pay your rent, you are required to pay it.
Mm-hmm.
So then providing your clients with those resources so that they can access them and helping them navigate that.
You touched on property management, which whether it's a multi-unit building, whether it's residential, commercial, or even small, there are maintenance requirements. And with this requirement to take into consideration physical distancing, how do you then ensure that the building is maintained and is secure? Because if there isn't that attention to that kind of detail, the building could become insecure, and then you have another threat that isn't the disease, but potential vandalism and theft. How do we address that issue in an uncertain time like this?
I think that at the moment, and the key component is at the moment, sanitization and making sure that your properties are as clean as possible. I know that the BC government the other day requested that rental housing providers have no unnecessary access to their clients' homes in terms of the rental housing, so that there's no additional activity. However, if there's a requirement, then you make those arrangements to access the unit. So for example, if there's a burst pipe or whatever have you, and taking extra precautions there. Of course, doing the hand sanitizing and doing all of the wipe downs and whatnot are very mandatory, I would say, and giving that level of comfort. Now, you touched on vandalism, and I think that that's an interesting one. It's an interesting question down the road. I'm hoping that our leaders in our government really, really take into consideration the impacts that their policies are having on homes and on all homes, on all people, in terms of their economic status, in terms of their ability to buy groceries and to have shelter. And that in and of itself will mitigate the need to really consider that at a great deal. Those are extraordinary measures, and if we get to to having that as an issue, I would be very, very disappointed.
So you have people who are a part of your network. What do you say to them right now if they go, okay, Jennifer, this is so unnerving. I don't want to stay in this market any longer. I want to sell. Is that a dangerous short-term action?
I think for each person, it's very different. We've got folks, REIN's been around for 28 years, so a long time. And we've actually had REIN members who have been REIN members for 28 years and a part of this community. So in some cases, that's going to make perfect sense for them. They'll have run their course investing in for, almost three decades, and now might be, truly, this is the last straw. I'm just not interested. And it's time for me to exercise my exit strategies, my succession plan. What does that look like? So it's truly a very case by case basis. Whereas, someone who's new, who's just getting into investing and they're wanting to buy their first property, well, I don't recommend buying your first property right this second. And that's because of the REIN's real estate cycle. If you're already in your deal, you will honor that and go through that process, of course, is legally required. But because of the impact and because of this formula, REIN's formula of the lagging indicators, this being COVID-19, will have a significant impact on the economy, as we know, and on jobs and on population, including immigration policies. Those three, and we look at 70 indicators when we do our analysis, but those three indicators right now are at a significant loss, unprecedented loss. And so as a result, that is going to impact the rental market downwards, and it will impact the property prices downward in time as well. So and that's why I said short term, medium term, and long term. Because long term, let's call it even 6 months out. to 2 years, there will be significant opportunity to purchase, and getting those relationships, the capital, and the business cases in place for when the time is right. That would be the appropriate measures. So it really, to answer your question, Stuart, it really just depends on where that individual is in their life cycle, in their real estate wealth, in their financial security, and what they're looking to accomplish out of their real estate portfolio right now or for the future.
Well, this is an interesting analysis of the situation that real estate investors find themselves in. And I think it's all sound insight and good logic about how you navigate your way through this in the short term, how it fits into your long-term strategies, and that if you're looking at purchasing new properties right at the moment, maybe take a wait-and-see approach.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I do believe that. And we will absolutely, REIN provides research, and that's what we're doing. So we'll be seeing more research from REIN this year than ever before. And for example, in terms of communication, actually, for our REIN community, we've increased what I was providing, for example, is a monthly what's behind the curtain segment. And that what's behind the curtain segment was, what are all the headlines, and what's the economic health happening, and what are the policies that impact real estate investors, and really understanding what those truly mean to you as a real estate investor. And we were providing that on a monthly basis. Well, we've increased that frequency to weekly. We're providing weekly analysis of here's some templates of how to communicate to your tenants, for example, and really providing a lot of resources, and doing special COVID. We're providing a COVID-19 special series on property management, on communication, on financing, on all of these components that are really relevant to all real estate investors right now. And I think it's very important that people recognize the quality of information, because there's so much. And because REIN has been around for 28 years, and because we don't sell real estate, we just don't. So we have a very unbiased perspective. I mean, of course, we're in, the bias is in terms of supporting real estate investors, and that's about it. So from a credibility, we've been able to maintain our lack of bias, and maintain sort of a factual approach, taking out the emotions, taking out the sensationalism. I have a master's degree in communications, in fact, and that master's degree focused on sensationalism and news and how it impacts democracy. So I'm completely passionate about this and providing real sources for our community. And we do share that actually on our REIN blog, for those of you who are not, some of them anyway, on our REIN blog and social media as well. But getting to the source, and there's really a number of places where one can locate themselves as close to the source as possible. And again, back to being around for 28 years, and with the rich legacy that Don R. Campbell, who was on your show last year, has created, we are able to really locate our sources very, very close to the originator. Let's put it that way. So having calls, for example, last week with the chief medical officer for WebMD, having conversations with the chief economist, for BMO, CIBC, close to the Scotiabank's economics. And of course, those aren't just all of them, but they're a sample of where we're getting our information, so that we're able to support the community and support real estate investors.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. I really appreciate you being on the show with us.